Not too long ago, I made a video explaining the differences and effects of the 3 modes in The Last Blade 2, but honestly, that video is pretty garbage. There's no editing, no script, random music, and on top of all of that, I was also sick while recording, so there's constant coughing and sniffling. I wouldn't recommend it. That aside, I wanted to explain how the modes in The Last Blade 2 work more clearly, so it's time to talk modes, of which there are 3: Power, Speed, and EX. There's a few major differences that sets apart each from each other, and defines their usual playstyle. Power uses a link system like KOF or Street Fighter. Speed uses a cancel system like most anime fighting games and comes with a few extra normals for combo filler, and EX takes a whopping 30% extra damage while using the cancel system of Speed. This means that Power plays completely different from Speed and EX because the way your moves and combos work is literally entirely different. One more major difference comes in the supers. Power grants access to a Super Desperation move, or SDM for short, which can only be used with full meter and when your health is below 25%, indicated by the flashing health bar. Speed is unable to use these SDMs and instead has a super called Fandango, which in practice is essentially a 50-50, which deals about 50% of your life bar in one go. How you can use your resources also changes, as Speed loses the ability to special or super cancel certain normals, and loses the ability to cancel any specials into supers. EX, on the other hand, can use both SDM and Fandango, and gains access to new special cancels, which can occasionally give characters access to super confirms of certain important moves that they couldn't do in other modes. Characters like Okaede and Setsuna become much scarier with meter in EX because of this. Unfortunately, this is affected by another major difference between the modes that hurts the viability of EX besides the massive damage increase: the meter building. There are many ways to build meter in Last Blade: hitting the opponent, getting hit yourself, or attacking someone's block. Power gets the most meter for every action by a very large amount. Even a single combo will usually give somewhere around 75% or higher. Speed gains less meter, but combos tend to have more hits on average than Power. For most characters, this still doesn't end up balancing it out, and Speed ends up having way less meter to work with. For EX, it's even worse. In Speed, you still gain meter for attacking the opponent's block, but in EX, you lose that too. Doesn't sound too different on paper, but in practice, EX characters usually don't have a full bar by the end of a round, minus a few rare exceptions like EX Amano or EX Okaede. Meter is very important in this game, not just for offense but for defense as well. One of the most important defensive mechanics is guard cancel, which requires a full bar of meter regardless of desperation, so having easy access to meter is more than just dealing lots of damage. What's even worse is that if you watched any footage of Power characters, like in our tournament VODs for example, wink wink nudge nudge, you may have noticed that some moves when blocked cause a bounce effect. This is directly tied to the guard cancel mechanic, and is also the reason for Power's generally superior frame data on block. All grounded lights and heavies in Power will bounce on block, which means that the move can't be guard cancelled against, and the block string will stop. The only exceptions are that all kicks, regardless of mode, won't bounce, and neither will aerials. In Speed and EX, no moves have the bounce property, meaning it is much easier to guard cancel the opponent's block string when they're using Speed or EX compared to Power. Now, given how important meter is, Speed and EX characters have to justify their poor meter efficiency with other tools that make up for the disparity. Luckily, Speed and EX have a few tricks up their sleeves. Since both modes don't have any normals that bounce, they have access to more true block strings using the cancel system, meaning that it is easier to mix up the opponent in these modes compared to Power. And while Power gets a garbage, super duper slow unblockable move for its 5 BC, Speed and EX gets an overhead which can launch opponents if used in combos. While it can be mashed out of, if the opponent isn't quick enough, it can be a pretty powerful combo starter. Speed can also give a character who didn't have very much of a combo game in Power a much more consistent way of damaging opponents, or may even enhance a character whose combo game was already quite strong. Certain characters can also make great use of Fandango, using true 50-50 setups or even true confirms, making them very difficult to block. In Desperation, you can even combo Fandango into Super, which is honestly not that useful, but it sure does look cool. Speed also has an easier time getting confirms off of stray jabs or lows, making a good Speed player very consistent when it comes to their damage output. Finally, the last difference between the modes is Stun. Stun isn't really usually a factor in most matches, but Speed and EX cannot stun opponents. The only real time that this is a big deal is with Okaide, since with the current rule set used by North American players, Okaide's loops allow for him to route around stun and TOD opponents, which is by far his biggest strength. Otherwise, this mechanic is mostly ignored. With all that said, Power is usually the best of the three modes, having the easiest access to meter, the higher damage off of stray hits, and the better frame data really add up, but that's not to say that the other two are completely worthless. Speed can really excel at offensive play, and certain characters can really take advantage of that. When it comes to these two modes, I'd say that it's completely fine to use whichever one you prefer. Some standout Speed characters are actually really good right now, namely Speed Moria, who is on par with the best character in the game, Power Zantetsu, and Speed Washizuka, who has been doing really well recently, even against the top 5. EX, on the other hand, is somewhat hard to justify most of the time. Only certain characters get any real advantages from using it compared to other modes, and usually that just requires that the character be really good regardless of the damage and meter nerf. The main two EXs that you're most likely to see is EX Moria because of his exceptional ability to weave in and out of neutral using the AC teleport glitch, and EX Amano, whose damage is just bonkers enough to be worth using. Each of the three modes is quite unique and add a lot to the game overall, and the fact that Power and Speed are so balanced is quite fun, since it's not only about what's strictly better or worse, and players get to express themselves freely with their choice. And while EX may be objectively the worst of the three by a wide margin, that doesn't mean that it's completely useless. The hype factor alone is enough to make some brave souls use it, and in theory, most EXs, if played perfectly, would ultimately perform better than Speed. At the end of the day, this game is sick, and you should play whatever you feel like, even if that way is EX Okina taking 40% extra damage compared to most of the cast. This has been Yagyu of the Atlantic Canada FGC. Feel free to support me by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing, and join us at our weekly Last Blade and Samurai Showdown tournaments in the Discord down in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.